So hello, everyone. It's great to see some familiar names in the audience. If everyone could keep their mics off during the presentation, that would be great, but feel free to leave your video on if you're comfortable with that. It might be nice to see some friendly faces in the audience while we're chatting. Also, there will be some time for questions and answers at the end. So if you do have questions for Vijay, please feel free to share them in the group chat, or when we open it up, feel free to just unmic yourself and ask him directly as well. So with that, welcome to the third edition of Charm Chats. I'm Bethany Larson, the Chief Investment Officer here at Charm, and I'm really excited to be chatting with Vijay Bhopal today from Urjaa Samadhan. Vijay started working in renewable energy in 2010 in Scotland, where he worked in wind farms and hydro projects. Since 2014, Vijay has thrown himself at the Energy Access Challenge. His first project in the space was with Urjaa Samadhan, a social enterprise based in Odisha, India, working with poor users of off-grid solar. Originally, Urjaa Samadhan started as a spares and repair service to try and rectify some of the chronic product breakdown in the solar sector. However, over time, the company developed into a full-service off-grid solar company, which you will hear more about today. Vijay has also spent 2 years as an energy analyst, researching and writing Practical Action's annual report, The Poor People's Energy Outlook, and has co-founded several businesses in the energy and agri-tech space, none of which have gone bust yet. Knock on wood, Vijay. Wonderful. So thank you for being here, Vijay. It's really great to have you.
You're most welcome. Thanks for that intro. My own joke made me laugh a little there.
Oh my gosh, wonderful. So to start, I'd love to just learn more about you and your journey. What led you to energy access work in India?
Well, I'm of Indian heritage, as you can probably tell, and I spent a lot of time in my childhood in India, and I always knew that I wanted to do something in India, but specifically working in economic development. That was what I wanted to do, and I didn't know that I was going to work in energy, but whatever I did, I would have done it in India at some point. So when I became a renewable energy professional, it was natural for me to look for opportunities of how can I be useful, how can I work in India. And then about 7 years ago, I was contacted by an academic at Edinburgh University, who was working in the state of Odisha, which I was only very tenuously connected with at that point. My family is not from that part of the country at all. He was already working in the solar sector in India, in the off-grid solar sector specifically, and I just found it amazingly interesting, and that was my in. Beyond the kind of opportunism of it, I think the energy sector in India is amazingly interesting. It's heavily centralized and decentralized at the same time. I'm sure we're going to talk about that more, but it's an incredibly interesting place to work from an energy perspective.
Great. That's actually a perfect segue into my next question, because the renewable energy sector in India is quite different from some of the other markets we work in. So it'd be great if you could just elaborate on what are some of the challenges that are unique to the Indian context?
Sure. Well, things are changing very quickly in India, but I'll just go back a little bit. In 2014, when I first started working there were 300 million people living off-grid from an electricity standpoint, which made it the country with the biggest unelectrified population in the world, actually. So that things have changed in that the national grid in India has grown now. Every village in India is grid connected, but that doesn't mean every house is. But every village has a grid connection point, a feeder. But but there are great challenges. One challenge is that the grid is still very dirty. Coal is used heavily in India. Another challenge is just reliability of the grid. We'll talk about the project that we're doing with you at Charm, I'm sure. But there are a lot of houses in India that are actually grid connected, but the grid is just so unreliable that other sources are needed too. So that's another challenge. And then there's the challenge of people just not being connected still. You hear a lot, and you'll hear a lot from the Indian government about all Indians being connected from an electricity standpoint, but it's not true. If you actually go, you'll see that there are village connections, but the household connections are still lacking in many rural areas. So there's a whole gamut of challenges, and then there's also the somewhat wicked problem of misinformation around this, which is that the government is a nationalist government, and they want to give the impression that things are better than they actually are, which is something that is quite difficult to contend with sometimes.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think a lot of us imagine solar as an off-grid solution. So it's interesting to think out what a rollout strategy would look like in a country where everyone is claimed to have grid access. So it'd be interesting to know from your perspective, what is the role of solar in India going forward?
I think it's got a big role. It's got a really big role. I'm not exactly sure what the level of energy understanding of the audience is. So, but I'll just go for it.
Go for it.
Sorry if I lose people. But I think it's got a really big role in several ways. First of all, and India is actually a leader in solar already. First of all, huge plants connecting to the grid. That's happening, and that will continue to happen. So reducing the carbon intensity of the grid is massive. Just because that's not the part of the energy sector that we work in doesn't mean it's not important. It's absolutely vital. So that's happening on one side. Then on the other side, you've got people in both rural and urban areas actually who are connected to the grid, but live with the situation that they don't have 24/7 access. Now, I remember when I used to visit my grandparents in Pune, in India, they had a schedule for load shedding. So they knew the grid wasn't strong enough to give everyone the electricity they needed at all times, but they knew when they were not going to have power. So they'd be like Thursday morning or Sunday evening or whatever. A couple of times a week, you would have 6 or 8 hours without electricity, but you knew it, so you planned around it. My grandparents had some money, so they actually had an inverter, and they would take power from the grid when they did have it and store it in a battery and use it for core things in the house during those times. So load shedding is something that's been around for a long time. In urban areas, it's managed, but in rural areas, it's not managed well. So you end up having very difficult energy situations where people don't actually know when they're going to have power and when they're not going to have power. And that's just terrible well, it's not great full stop, but it's bad for production. So if I want to do work using power, whether that's tailoring, running my shop, using my fridges and freezers, all that kind of stuff, if I don't know when I'm going to have power and when I don't, then it's just a big problem. So solar as a backup is massively useful for that reason. So you've got the grid side, you've got this backup side, and then you've also got people that don't have any other access to electricity at all. And we're doing solar projects as standalone systems, but there's also mini grids, both AC and DC. So there's all these different uses for solar. So I think it's got actually quite a bright future in India.
Thanks, Vijay. I know that we've chatted a bit about kind of the debate between aggregation versus integration. And you're using cloud solar products to enable you to manage your pay-as-you-go financing scheme for your customers. And so I'm wondering, why did you create your own product rather than using an existing software provider?
Yeah, interesting one. Well, there are a lot of products out there. So you've got really good, the solar space is getting quite crowded, I would say. But just to give a bit of context for the audience, you've got companies that sell solar kits. So for off-grid areas where they need solar as a primary electricity source, you've got these kits that come. So they've got a panel, battery, charge controller, appliances all put together. That's one way of doing it. So I could go and I could buy a solar kit and then just use that in my house. And then there are other companies that they don't use kits. They just procure the different parts of the system from different suppliers. And depending on where you are in the world, one system may work better than the other. In India, there don't tend to be very many integrated kit companies. The aggregation model is the norm. And the reason for that is that these companies then get to use whatever products they want. They're not tied to different suppliers. They're not tied to selling particular appliances. They can change things as they go quickly, and that's useful. So the reason that we made our own monitoring system is that we want to support and espouse this aggregator model where people have full choice over what they're selling. So we made our monitoring system as a charge controller, which is one of those components of a solar home system. And there are a couple of other companies who do similar things, but there was a gap in the market for that. So we've made this system now. We're using it in our own projects, and we're selling it as a business-to-business product to other companies as well.
Amazing. Pivoting slightly, but can you tell us a bit more about the impact that your work is having on the ground, especially with the loan that we've done with you with Term?
Yeah, I mean, the project that we've done with you is so interesting. It's genuinely probably the most interesting project I've ever done, and the one that I'm most proud of. And it started quite strangely because we were going to do the project in a rural area in the northern part of Orissa, and then because of COVID and the difficulty of traveling last year, especially, we totally changed it. And we decided to do the project close to where our office is in the an urban part of the state, in a city called Cuttack. And at first, it seemed like quite a big change, but it's been amazing, and I'll explain why. And I didn't even know this before the project, actually. We estimate 8,000 households in that region of Cuttack alone that have been displaced because of Cyclone Fani. And that was 2 years ago, the cyclone. And so there's this urban displacement, and they've resettled along these massive rivers that are over there. The rainy season is very heavy in that part of the world. So yeah, these huge rivers, and they've settled all along the banks of these rivers. And they're kind of semi-permanent / permanent structures, but quite ramshackle. And whilst they do have grid connections, it's just, if you think about load shedding and what is shed first when it comes to turning parts of the grid off, these will go first. These are not the most important connections to the grid company. So you've got all these displaced communities, thousands of households in slums near to fairly affluent cities, it's just a really interesting use case for solar, and it's kind of low-hanging fruit because there's so many people with a distinct need, and it's an area with high levels of economic activity, and yeah, we've just found that solar works really well as a secondary energy source in these places, and we're looking forward to scaling up and doing more projects like this in that area. And there's also coastal areas right around the state that have very similar problems.
Amazing. So I guess my last question before we open it up to Q&A, where do you see Urjaa Samadhan in the next 3 to 5 years?
Always difficult to answer that type of question, but I mean, as I said, I think we've hit on something which is actually more interesting to me than rural energy provision, both from a commercial perspective and also just from a social impact numbers perspective. You know, having so many households and that level of demand so close to our doorstep, because our office is in Bhubaneswar, and Bhubaneswar and Cuttack. Cuttack is the place where we're doing the project. They're just 30 kilometers away from each other. They're almost like twin cities. So, and I've been to that city 10, 12 times and just never known about this energy problem. So this project with Charm has opened the door to that. And I think that there's a lot that we can do there and zero in on that niche of urban slums, urban displacement. So that's one thing. The second thing is that, you know, we want to sell our tech as well. The tech is what we've spent the last 3 years building, and it's in the market, works really well. We've got a little foothold, so we're selling that across India and also the rest of the world as well. We've got customers in Benin, Uganda, Kenya, Honduras. So the twin track, I don't know exactly where it's going to go in terms of us doing projects and us selling tech, but at the moment we're doing both.
Fantastic. And I'm sure you'll accomplish all those things too. But now I would love to stop talking myself and open it up for Q&A to the rest of the audience. So, you know, again, feel free to send questions in the chat if you're feeling a bit shy. Otherwise, yeah, feel free to unmic and chat with Vijay directly.
Looks like you might have to ask more questions.
Yeah, so I see Sarah Binney has her hand raised. Yeah, please.
Hiya, I can try and wait. Can you see me? Okay. That's really interesting. Thank you, Vijay. I was wondering what the uptake's been like for the B2B side of things. I don't know how much it's just sort of like, here's a product, they can just roll with it and take it away and do it on their own, or how much do you still need to be involved with that? How does it scale?
It should be pretty light touch. I mean, essentially, it's a smart metering product. I mean, to date, we've been pretty hands-on with customers because it's difficult building an IoT product and getting it right. It's taken us several iterations. Actually, having our own company that sells solar equipment has been really useful as a test bed, so we can actively monitor stuff and iterate. But yeah, I mean, it should be a really simple sales cycle, and hopefully we're just going to be in a position where we can send stuff in the post, and that's it.
That's really cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Any other questions? Actually, I had one interesting one come in through the chat, if there isn't a brave soul willing to speak up. All right, okay. Oh, yeah, Graham, go for it.
Hi, Vijay. Hi, Bethany.
Hi.
Pleasure to meet you. Can I ask the COVID question?
Ooh.
Right. So how has COVID affected your work in the last year? Obviously, You know, you kind of all kicked off at the same time, it seemed as well in the last year. And just, you know, I know that various places in India have gone into lockdown again just recently in the last couple of days. You know, solar energy, being able to have that energy at home whilst you're locked down at home, surely making a massive difference, hopefully, as well.
Yeah, COVID has been huge. Last year, well, firstly, I'm going to say that, touch wood, it's not going to be as bad this time. India is experiencing a really bad wave. I've lost count which number it is. I think it's third wave. But last year was bad. I mean, in April, May, June, everything was shut, and it was pretty shocking. You know, as somebody that knows India well, I didn't expect that to happen in that country. You know, the way that this huge wave of migration happened from urban centers back to rural areas because of that lockdown announcement overnight. Let's not forget. I mean, the fact that it was overnight isn't surprising when it comes to India, but anyone who knows about demonetization will recognize that. But, you know, it was massive. And for us, our manufacturing stopped, site visits stopped. We were supposed to be setting up this project with Charm. All of that work stopped. The levels of COVID were so high, so much higher than people than what was reported. We were getting reports all the time about field staff of our partner organizations having COVID and whatnot. So it really was big. This time, I feel like people are prepared for it better. I don't think the economy will stop to the same extent. So we're hopeful that we can just continue, and we've got plans to set up more projects over the next few months. And I suppose we just have to wait and see. I think from a manufacturing perspective, it won't be an issue this time.
Glad to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham, for your question. Who's next?
Beth, I have a question if I'm allowed.
You're allowed, go for it, Gav.
Am I allowed a question? Thank you. Hi, Vijay. My question was around, how do you see, and maybe it's a difficult one to answer, the government's ability to do stuff moving forward? So considering the bold statements that have come out of, you know, they're 100% electrified and everything else, do you think that will lead to a lack of investment? Or do you think there'll be an acknowledgement that it's kind of a slightly overreaching statement, if that's an appropriate way to say it? Or how do you see that kind of affecting policies and moving forward and sort of the expansion of more supply when they've already claimed everyone's grid connected? Like, where do you see that moving over the next few years, if you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it doesn't help the off-grid solar sector, that's for sure. There's been a few things like GOGLA, the Global Off-Grid Lighting Association, and also Power for All have had to come out and kind of almost like protect the space of the off-grid solar sector and say the job isn't done, there is a future here. I mean, I've explained previously what I think the use cases are, but it is a negative for our sector when the government's coming out and saying the job is done. So from a PR point of view, that's bad. But from a technical point of view, there's things we can do. Specifically, I think we need to look at grid compatibility. So how do we make systems that actually do fit with grid connections? How do we offer people the ability to use AC appliances? So we're looking at using microinverters, for example. Or how do we network our systems as well? So whether that's a DC grid or an AC grid. So there are things that we can do to combat it, but you know, definitely the noises that come out of the government aren't great for the sector.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Gav. We actually had a couple interesting questions come through the chat. The first is, so energy, especially cooking, is very much a women's issue. So how have you managed to include women in decision making?
Cooking is massively a women's issue. That's definitely true. My grandma used to cook on the tawa as well, sitting next to the flame. Yeah, I mean, it is hard, to be honest, because in most Indian households, the head of the household is a real concept. I mean, that concept of head of household is a bit outdated or doesn't even exist here in the UK anymore, but definitely does in India, in the households we're working with. So it's about purchasing power. What we found with the project with Charm is that there are actually quite a few female-led households in that area, which is good because people are making decisions for themselves. But one thing that we're trying to do is concentrate on customers that have a productive use of their electricity. So whether in this project specifically, we've targeted tailors, and they're all apart from one are women, and they have an electricity need for their stitching. So that's really good because it's their business, it's their decision, and it's their investment. A lot of the shops are run by women as well. So next time we want to, maybe not next time, but at some point we want to start targeting the shops as well. So there are things we can do like that, but I can't deny that there is a problem around decision making in India when it comes to gender.
Great, thanks, Vijay. So unfortunately, that's about all the time that we have for today. Thank you everyone for your fantastic questions. If you do have additional questions for us, please feel free to reach out. You can find us on LinkedIn. I'll also drop some of our social media links in the chat shortly. But thank you so much for joining. I really hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something new today. I know that I did. This video will be available on YouTube probably tomorrow. And yeah, like I said, also feel free to follow us on social media if you want to keep up to date with what we're doing here at Charm. I will drop those links in the chat now, actually. And Vijay, feel free to drop any links as well. And then finally, I just wanted to say one last thank you to Vijay for sharing your valuable time and perspective. It's really been great chatting with you today.
Appreciate it. Enjoyed that.
Thanks, Vijay. All right, everyone, please stay safe, and we hope to see you back here soon for another Charm Chat.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.